As you likely know, the world has been facing a bit of difficulty fighting off a pesky little virus commonly called COVID 19. Beginning in late 2019 in the Hubei province of China, it quickly spread across the globe despite the best efforts of health organizations. At the recording of this video, we are quickly approaching the second anniversary of the date former president and two-time impeachment record holder Donald Trump announced the nationwide state of emergency. During these 2 years, we have gone through mass unemployment, travel bans, stay-at-home orders, protests, acts of domestic terror, and one of the most complicated elections in recent history. Millions of people have lost their lives worldwide, and hospitals across the country are under incredible amounts of stress due to limited resources and the challenge of caring for victims of the pandemic, as well as patients dealing with unrelated illnesses and injury. It seems like we have been living through this perfect storm of turmoil and political unrest, and I have to ask myself, how did we end up this way? This is the first in what I plan to be a series of videos exploring the topic and the response from the government. On January 29th, 2020, the White House Coronavirus Task Force was established with U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar being appointed as the chairman. Alex Azar would only lead that task force for 28 days until former VP Mike Pence would be appointed to take over. Let's get to know our leading actor. Alex Azar started his career after graduating from Yale. He worked as a clerk for Judge Antonin Scalia, and if you had a hard time pronouncing that name, don't worry, you are not alone.
For Justice Antonin Scalia.
He also worked with prosecutor Ken Starr during the Clinton Whitewater investigation. Eventually, he was confirmed to serve as the general counsel and then later deputy secretary of the Health and Human Resources under the Bush administration. In 2007, he was hired on by Eli Lilly, a major pharmaceutical company, as their top spokesperson and lobbyist. Eventually, he would become president of the U.S. subsidiary Lilly USA in 2009. This is of particular note because during his tenure as the deputy director of the Health and Human Services, Eli Lilly was being investigated and sued on criminal charges for improper marketing and sale of psychiatric drugs over the years 1999 to 2005. The case would eventually be closed in 2009 after settling in court for $1.4 billion. And that might sound like a lot of money, but that's only a small fraction of the $30 billion in profits generated by the illegal sales during the date range of the lawsuit alone, and doesn't really even take into account all of the profits they earned after the fact. Draw whatever conclusions you like from that information. I know that I have. Over the course of his leadership at Lilly USA, the price of insulin doubled in the US and tripled in Mexico. And that even caused fines to be levied against Eli Lilly. In January of 2017, Alex Azar would leave Lilly USA and once more enter the world of politics. He was nominated by Trump to become the next Secretary of the Health and Human Services and was confirmed in Congress despite complaints from prominent Democrats that during Mr. Azar's tenure at Eli Lilly, this multi-billion-dollar corporation dodged taxes while charging Americans outrageously high prices for life-saving prescription drugs, and that Azar never, not one time, signed off on a decrease in the price of a drug in his time at Lilly USA. Before the pandemic, his primary focus was lowering prescription drug costs in a way that avoided direct pricing regulation. He suggested importing cheaper drugs from places like Canada and mainly focused on changing incentives for hospitals and companies to drive prices down. Additionally, he focused on attempting to revise the ACA, despite using some of the powers granted under the Obama-era health legislation to further his own agenda. For instance, he created rules to limit prescription drug rebates used by pharmacies to make drugs more affordable for their customers, and he saw pushback from watchdog groups for this. He also managed to create rules limiting federal funds for Planned Parenthood and issue notices on California for mandating abortions be covered by healthcare providers. He is, after all, a staunch supporter of the anti-abortion movement. Notably, he claims to be committed to the health and well-being of all Americans including the unborn. That is a commitment that he would still fail to uphold. On January 3rd, 2019, Alex Azar was informed by the CDC about the coronavirus. 15 days later, he would inform then President Trump about the virus. On the 28th, Azar stated that the virus would not impact an American's day-to-day life. And the next day, Alex Azar began his 28-day tenure as the head of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Over the next month, he would go on to make a number of mistakes that ultimately led to his replacement. Although he managed to hold on to a token leadership position, by April 3rd, he had stopped attending the daily briefings entirely. And at the end of the Trump administration, he would claim that his legacy had been tarnished. Alex Azar appointed his chief of staff, Brian Harrison, as lead coordinator over the HHS response to the coronavirus. Brian had recently been promoted after the former chief of staff resigned. According to Reuters, many saw this as a mistake, as Mr. Harrison was viewed as inexperienced and lacking the proper medical knowledge to tackle such an important responsibility. Another early mistake was claiming that the CDC would be able to provide 1 million tests within weeks on the first day the task force was created. This turned out to be false because the tests had a glitch that rendered them useless. On February 5th, the tests were recalled, and it wouldn't be until 5 weeks later that a proper test was available. During this time, he assured the American people that the full force of the government was on top of the issue, and that he was tapping the influenza early detection system to start testing. As you know, with the test being ineffective, this proved to be useless, and the claim that the full force of the government was being used was also less than true. Representatives from the FDA were not included on the White House Coronavirus Task Force until Mike Pence took over. Now, we have conflicting stories about who exactly excluded the head of the FDA. Azar insists that Harrison didn't make that call, but officials that were around at the time say otherwise. The HHS has been silent about the issue, and while it is one man's word against another, somebody decided that the commissioner of the Food and Drug Association didn't need to play a part in heading off the coronavirus. If you don't understand why this is a big deal, let me read you the FDA's mission statement. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for protecting the public health by ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biological products, and medical devices, and by ensuring the safety of our nation's food supply, cosmetics, and products that emit radiation. The FDA also has responsibility for regulating the manufacturing, marketing, and distribution of tobacco products to protect the public health and to reduce tobacco use by minors. The FDA is responsible for advancing the public health by helping to speed innovations that make medical products more effective, safer, and more affordable, and by helping the public get the accurate, science-based information they need to use medical products and foods to maintain and improve their health. The FDA also plays a significant role in the nation's counterterrorism capability. FDA fulfills this responsibility by ensuring the security of the food supply and by fostering development of medical products to respond to deliberate and naturally emerging public health threats. So if you ignore that bit about tobacco, there's something in almost every single paragraph of their statement that could be directly related to the coronavirus. I would definitely categorize the coronavirus as a naturally emerging public health threat. I would say that at this time, we need accurate science-based information to maintain and improve our health, and that ensuring the safety and efficacy of tests would certainly be of use. This organization exists to keep Americans safe, knowledgeable, and healthy. They want to speed innovations and guarantee that medical products, drugs or otherwise, function properly. Now, I have no way of knowing this for sure, but I'm very curious to see if the original CDC COVID test kits got the FDA seal of approval. Perhaps earlier involvement might have sped discovery and development of working tests, but we'll never know. Alex Azar did institute self-quarantining measures for individuals that had visited China and travel restrictions to attempt to limit the spread. However, every news appearance and press conference Azar held focused on one message: the coronavirus is not a risk. We are prepared, and it will not present a danger to Americans. On February 25th, he claimed that the virus was contained. That same day, the CDC told media to prepare for a pandemic. On the 26th of February, one day after his claims of containment, Mike Pence would be appointed as the new head of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. But even after he was replaced, news was still breaking. The HHS allegedly sent untrained and unprotected workers from one of its social services branches in Texas to assist the CDC with American evacuees returning from China. Alex Azar disputes this claim, but members of the CDC stated that officials were sent without proper protective equipment and acted with no real regard to hazardous conditions that could enable the spread of the virus. Now, despite his replacement as the head of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, he did maintain his position as Secretary of the HHS until the end of the Trump administration. He now has a job teaching at the University of Miami at their Herbert Business School. Brian Harrison was awarded the Coronavirus Pandemic Civilian Service Campaign Medal, the criteria for which is officers on active duty between the 1st of March 2020 and the 21st of December 2020, and who are eligible to receive an award in accordance with Section 6-9, qualify for the C-19 PCM, which basically makes this a participation award for holding a government office during the pandemic. Congratulations, Brian. You really knocked this one out of the park. You earned that. He went on to become a member of the House of Representatives for Texas, where he supports party lines to oppose President Biden's vaccine mandates and regularly takes interviews on Newsmax, furthering his political goals and career. Well, it seems like all's well that ends well for those two. But the United States continues to top the charts across almost all categories of COVID-related casualties. We account for nearly a fifth of all COVID deaths worldwide, and we recently hit over 1 million new cases in a single day. It's been rough to talk about this topic, but I really feel that it's necessary. In my opinion, a lot of this flew under the radar due to the George Floyd protests and the election. And those issues were very important, and in the case of the fight for racial justice and equality, they continue to be important. But I do think that it would be a mistake not to review the events that led us to the situation we're currently living through, and to take measures to ensure that it does not happen again. Some may claim that due to the unprecedented nature of the pandemic, it may not be fair to judge the government that harshly, but I disagree. Many other countries had real success without trillion-dollar health and human service departments. While the virus started in China, in March of 2020, the Hubei province had one of the lowest numbers of cases worldwide. And on October 7th of 2020, New Zealand had declared itself COVID-free. In Alex Azar's confirmation hearing, it was said over and over that he was the best man for the job, that he had dealt with epidemics, the anthrax scares, and all sorts of challenges that should have prepared him. But once he was truly put to the test, he was found wanting. Through his mismanagement, a critical window to stemming the tide of the pandemic was wasted, and it's the American people who paid the price. His legacy may be tarnished, but we are facing the consequences of his actions.